it. How are we going to send maybe a couple of hundred guys to work someplace every day and night for the next 6 months and still send 1,800 guys to work in a firehouse?
For the rest of the city.
Right. So you do have to think outside the box a little bit. We got lucky in that we got some help from the federal government in the way of how they handle large-scale forest fires and whatnot. Mm-hmm. They're very organized. And what they do is they use federal employees in different jobs. Like they might be in the Bureau of Indian Affairs. They might be in land management. But they're trained in this other field. And then during the summer or whatever months they need to, they bring them in on overtime, basically. They give up their job in Indian Affairs. And they manage a large-scale forest fire. They helped us. They came in and they brought a little order to it. So be willing to maybe take some outside help.
I would think that would be a major adjustment.
It was
to take help at this time.
A big. Well, I'll go even bigger. That was done on a small scale, so that was easy to adapt. And what they were doing for us was basically saying, you have to be able to find, like let's say we're going to put 400 men to work tonight. I have to know at 10 after 3 in the morning, if I say, I need to find Paul Brown, I need to know where Paul Brown is every moment. I have to account for every person I have working for me. So they brought a little more order to that. We're not used to, generally in the fire service, if you have a situation that goes on for more than 24 hours, it's odd. Okay? So this is a situation that's going to go on for maybe 6 months. So you have to kind of change your thinking. So they were helpful there. But the other thing, the big question I think came up, I wasn't involved in it, but are you going to let us do it? In other words, I'm sure somebody might have said, bring in the Corps of Engineers. Mm-hmm. These guys are firemen. This is no longer a fire situation. Bring in the Army, or, somebody who's trained maybe to do this. Now, we would have fought that, because in addition to the, almost 3,000 casualties, 343 which of ours, we want to do this. We feel those are our guys. We're gonna bring them out. But I'm sure that conversation occurred on some level. A month or two into it, there was some talk about doing just that, and there was a big fight right at the scene of whether they weren't going to let us in to work, And then Giuliani was still the mayor, I believe, so that did come up. But in a situation maybe not like this, but in other words, let's say businesses handled something that they're completely out of left field, and this is not what they do. This isn't their mission. Whatever. What do you do? Well, bring somebody else in. You're not equipped to do this. We weren't going to allow that to happen, probably. But that could have happened, I guess. I guess if you brought somebody in retrospect, 20 years later, who was an environmentalist, expert, said, well, you shouldn't have had those guys working there. They should have been dressed differently,
hazmat.
All of that. The whole thing should have been treated differently. Now, that might have also raised questions of how are you going to deal with the deceased? Are you going to respect them and try to save every one of them individually? Or are you bringing in backhoes? Now, if you have a family member, would you want to watch that? Scenario where it's dump trucks and backhoes? That's, that might not have flown. I don't think it would have flown, but some other person watching this thing 20 years later and said, yeah, but now you've incurred all these other debts following up because of the way you did the recovery. You have 165 guys have died from either cancer or lung-related illnesses, and that's probably going to go up. So somebody might say it could have been done differently. I don't know, better is a bad word, or worse, but differently maybe. So again, that was probably going on above my pay grade at the time. But I think it happened, you know. But then we had to make a commitment. Okay, we're staying. Okay, what are we going to do? How are we going to rotate people? Myself and another chief were asked to do the night tour, be the night tour operations chief, you know, for the fire department. I did, you know, on one night on, one night off. And you'd work about 16, 17 hours. And they said, can you do it? I said, well, can you do it for 2 months? And we said, well, we'll try. You know, we did it for about 6 weeks, and then we were completely shot. The other thing was during the day we were going to funerals. So it wasn't, you know, that easy. You know, I remember going to work one night. My sister lives across the street from me. I did at the time. And I had just showered and shaved, and I put on a fresh uniform. I just said hello to her real quick as I was getting in my car. And she said, you look like shit. And I said to myself, this is as good as I'm going to look for the next 20 hours, you know. You run out of gas and you don't know it. Mm-hmm. So rotating people, we did that. Maybe we could have done it differently. Maybe it should have been sooner. I worked there till November 1st or so, and then I went back again in April. They still needed some guys to do some supervision down there. So I did the last 5 weeks there as well. And I noticed some other agencies had kept the same people on the whole time. They were completely burned out. They didn't want to talk to anybody. They had really short fuses. The cooperation that existed in the first 5 weeks when we were working between the police department, the fire department, sanitation, the construction industry was terrific. I went back in April; it was non-existent because some of the agencies had kept the same person on, and the guys just got burned out. So that's something you'd have to look at. Crisis management, you know, how much can an individual take? Whether it's hours, also the type of work. You know, whether we were doing body recoveries, you know, and trying to give them as much dignity as possible. But I remember what got me. We'd have nights where we didn't recover anybody, particularly in the beginning, because we didn't get to a level where we could get anybody.
Because you're cleaning all the debris out.
Yeah, and there were, and it was frustrating to spend an entire night, and then you know you talk to headquarters and say, well, how'd you do? And we said, we didn't get anybody all night. So in other words, we had a couple hundred people working here, and we haven't recovered anybody in a whole night. That was depressing, and then we'd get a couple of nights of that in a row. Sometimes that was very depressing. We just hadn't hit a level where, you know, we could find people. That came later. And then some might say find 20 people. You know, in other words, you might find a whole company of guys together, and you find the pieces of them. You know, and then you could say, okay, this is where 2 truck was working, or whatever. You could say that. But it's not. You know, this is a you know, this is a depressing thing to even think about doing. You know, now you're going to spend how many more months working on recovering bodies, and not everybody is maybe equipped to do that mentally or physically. But physically it is probably extremely important. Even if you're willing, there comes a time when your body is just going to break down. It's not, you know, you're not sleeping right. You're not eating right. It's what you're dealing with is you're still, like I said, that site smoked for weeks and weeks because it was burning underneath. And we tried every conceivable order, foam from Con Edison, because even the federal government was calling up saying, can't you do something? Because every night on NBC News, this smoke existed forever while they recover bodies. You know, the visual's horrible, you know.